Shri Shashikant Sharma, Comptroller and Auditor General, Republic of India. Mrs. Vijay Thakur Singh, High Commissioner of India to Singapore. Ambassador Gopinath Pillai, Chairman, Institute of South Asian Studies and Ambassador at Large, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Singapore. Dr. Duburi Subara, Ex-Governor of RBI and Distinguished Visiting Fellow at the Institute of South Asian Studies. These distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, a very good afternoon. On behalf of the Institute of South Asian Studies, I warmly welcome you to this afternoon's distinguished public lecture by Shri Shashikant Sharma, where he will be speaking on the topic Governance Issues in the Context of Public Auditing. It is now my pleasure to invite Ambassador Gopinath Pillai, Chairman of the Institute of South Asian Studies, National University of Singapore, to deliver the opening remarks. Ambassador Pillai, please.
Good afternoon. This is Shashikant Sharma, Controller, Auditor General of India, High Commissioner, Excellency Mrs. Vijay Thakur Singh, Ms. Dr. Subara, ladies and gentlemen. I must apologize to Mr. Sharma for the rather small attendance. We chose this location because it's center of the district, the business district, and normally we get a good crowd. I think both Mr. Subarao and Mrs. Vijay Thakur Singh will tell you that our functions are normally well attended. But unfortunately, we had to compete with the Lunar New Year, and it starts on Wednesday, Thursday, and a lot of offices take the whole week off. It's like Diwali in India and Christmas and sort of thing. So I'm sorry, but I'm sure we will be very happy to hear what you have to say in spite of this. It gives me great pleasure to welcome you all to the ISAS public lecture on governance issues in the context of public auditing by Mr. Shri Shashikant Sharma. The CAG, as we know, is an independent body entrusted with the job of objective auditing of public accounts, which has immense importance in the Indian context. Speaking about the office of the CAG, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, the architect of the Indian Constitution, said during the Constituent Assembly in between 1948 and 49 debates, this is what exactly he said. The dignitary or officer is probably the most important officer in the Constitution of India, and his duties are far more important than the duties even of the judiciary. He should have been certainly as independent as the judiciary. In the recent past, multiple controversies regarding appropriation of public funds have only re-emphasized the importance of accurate governance and public auditing. This quotation from Dr. Ambedkar was not something I had known. I knew Dr. Ambedkar's very strong views on this office, but I think it is my colleague, D. Mukherjee, who dug up this quotation, which I thought was very appropriate. The cases pertaining to auctions of the allocation of coal blocks as well as licenses for the telecoms have led to many questions and the need for the CAG to address imminent issues of governance. In a complex country like India, achieving excellence in public auditing, a key issue in the wake of corruption and other controversies, which have implications only on the country's image, not only on the country's image, but in various other aspects as well. We have entered an era where the people of India look to the CAG for fair and transparent accounting governance. We are extremely delighted to have Mr. Sharma among us today, and I hope he will be able to share with us the valuable experience of working as a CAG of India, the imminent challenges facing him, and how governance in public auditing may be improved. Mr. Sharma has served in extremely important positions in the Indian government throughout the career. He has previously served as Secretary of Department of Financial Services in the Ministry of Finance, Secretary Information Technology in the Ministry of Communication and Information Technology, and just prior to taking up the position of CAG has been Defense Secretary. He was elected by the General Assembly of the United Nations as a member of the UN Board of Auditors in 2013. His other international responsibilities include member of UN Panel of External Auditors, chair of the Knowledge Sharing and Knowledge Services Committee of the International Organizations of Supreme Audit Institutions, chair of the working group of INTOSI on IT audit. A point I would like to make, Mr. Sharma, is that we are delighted you are here, because if you look at the Asian continent and you ask yourself how many countries in Asia would have an independent auditor general who will come and share his thoughts in a public lecture. I think it speaks very well for India, in that the transparency that it shows, that you are prepared to stand up here and talk about your job, answer questions. This is something that very few, hardly any, I would say, among the Asian countries would be able to do. And I think you should be proud to be able to do that. We thank you for coming. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, let me just sit down, and then the MC will carry on with the rest of the day. Thank you, Mr. Sharma.
Thank you, Ambassador Pillai. It now gives me great pleasure to invite Shri Shashikant Sharma to deliver his public lecture.
So you can, how much time you, whatever you like.
I had this plane yesterday, so I was glad to sit here.
Please.
Yesterday I was in the gardens, by the way. There I had a sprain.
Sprain?
But minor one, of course. Very
So you for gardens do that.
serious. No, but garden was fantastic, I must say. Thank you very much. Dr. D. Subbarao, Ambassador Shri Gopinath Pillai, Excellency High Commissioner of India, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. I am indeed very pleased to come to Singapore and attend this lecture, which is being organized under the auspices of National University of Singapore. I'm coming from Malaysia. I was there to chair the Asian Organization of Supreme Audit Institutions Assembly, that is, the assembly is held once in 3 years. And I handed over my charge to Malaysia during this conference. Needless to say that National University of Singapore is doing a very good job in promoting good governance Asia, which constitutes half the world, remains a decisive factor in global affairs. However, Asian countries have several governance challenges which are unique to this region and are difficult to analyze on the basis of Western concepts only. Asia itself is quite diverse, as you know, and South Asia is a region which has got its own governance issues. While a problem may require country-specific solution, but there may be some common issue also. Therefore, an institution like South Asian Studies Institute here under the National University is doing a good job by dedicating itself to contemporary issues, research on contemporary issues pertaining to South Asia region. My lecture today will be in 3 parts. First, I will be discussing about the role being played by public auditing in improving the governance. In the second part, I will discuss the CAG of India, what CAG of India is doing to improve, to enhance the value and impact of its reports. And finally, I will be touching upon certain challenges which are being faced by public auditing in today's changing world, the current scenario. As we know that good governance is the cornerstone of human progress and development. History shows that states which have practiced good governance prospered and flourished. It is if you want to define it in a more broad terms, general terms, it's a system of public administration which is effective in delivering services and meeting the needs of its citizens. Also, we have to use public resources efficiently. Also, the governance system has to be just, ethical, and responsive. In emerging economies, more than anything else, it is the deficit of good governance that impedes growth and development. While the Commonwealth countries inherited the same British model of governance, it was the governance reforms undertaken by the Singapore government in the early 60s and 70s that, to put in the words of Mr. Lee Kuan Yew, which converted it from a third world island into a first world oasis. The Singapore reform model, based on rolling back of the state and creation of an efficient bureaucracy, has served as a benchmark. These reform efforts have enabled Singapore to be consistently ranked as one of the top 5 countries in the Corruption Perception Index annually brought out by the Transparency International. Now today, good governance has acquired certain additional connotations also. We talk of smart government, which involves increased private participation, citizen engagement, and use of technology. In India, I'm proud to say that India has also undertaken reforms in these directions, wherein we are trying to create smart cities, improve the ease of doing business in India, simplifying regulations, and of course, tackling corruption. There are, what I understand that, simply speaking, that good governance has got 2 main pillars. One is accountability and the other is transparency. The principle of accountability holds that government officials responsible to the citizenry for their decisions and actions. They are responsible to the public for their decisions and actions. And transparency requires that such decisions and actions of those in government are open to public scrutiny. Now, Parliament is the primary instrument of enforcing government's accountability to the people, and Supreme Audit institutions like CAG of India has a vital role in this regard. But this accountability aspect has not been new to our country in India. As old as 4th century BC, Kautilya in his magnum opus Arthashastra had emphasized the need for having a uniform bookkeeping practices. And Kautilya had also asked for periodic reporting of public expenditure. And finally, in Arthashastra itself, he advocated for an independent audit authority also, which may be somewhat akin to our CAG. The concept of corruption and power, in fact, were common in those days even. And it was felt that power needs to be controlled. So Kautilya's Arthashastra also gives all those details of how power is to be controlled. But in the modern times also, there is a very good quote which I have been able to dig out, and this is from Kennedy, John F. Kennedy. It says, here similarly, it says, the men who create power make an indispensable contribution to the nation's greatness. But the men who question power make a contribution just as indispensable, for they determine whether we use power or power uses us. Now, there are, say in SSI, I had just attended in Kuala Lumpur, we had prepared a strategic plan for the next 5 years. There also we put a vision, and we said in the vision that the vision of this plan is professional member Supreme Audit institutions promoting good governance. This was the vision. United Nations post-2015 development agenda also talks of importance of the auditing agencies in promotion of good governance. The exact words are promoting and fostering the efficiency, accountability, effectiveness, and transparency of public administration by strengthening Supreme Audit institutions. This resolution was adopted by UN on 19 December 2014, as early as last December. Now about CAG of India, already Dr. Pillai has mentioned. Now we are an institution which is 154-year-old, this rather 155, and mandated by the Constitution to act as a watchdog of public purse. CAG sees the public resources are spent, that the public resources are spent according to the legislative mandate and towards the stated objective. It evaluates the performance of the organizations to see if they are able to achieve their outcomes effectively and efficiently. It also helps in prevention of waste, fraud, and corruption. CAG therefore exercises oversight over all government activities where public money is spent. Apart from the union and state government ministries department, the CAG audits about 1,200 public sector undertakings, some 400 autonomous bodies, and some 4,400 bodies substantially financed by the government. As briefly mentioned by Dr. Pillai, we have some international responsibilities also. We are, at present, I am one of the 3 members of UN Audit. In the past also we have been doing audit of various UN agencies, such as United Nations Headquarters, World Food Program, International Atomic Energy. That way we are contributing to global governance also. Now how CAG is, or public auditing, I must say, because CAG I will be using later part, but public auditing is contributing, or how it is working to improve governance. These are some of the points which I will mention. The first is that we are the equitable and accelerated economic growth is the prerequisite for improving of living standards of the people, and this in turn is dependent on availability of financial resources and investment. Now, by our various audits, we are preventing inefficient use of public resources, or at least we are raising issues, raising our objections on inefficient use of public resources. Waste and corruption, as we know, are serious deterrents to economic progress. We as public auditors contribute towards better fiscal management of the economy by suggesting measures to improve quality of public expenditure, revenue collection, as well as public borrowing. Now, in India, more than half of the public expenditure directly relates to socio-economic development. Last year's figure is that we spent around 53% of the total public resources, budget resources. That was around $270 billion on socio-economic programs. So performance audit of numerous socio-economic development programs conducted by us help ensure that benefits reach the intended beneficiaries and efficient delivery of outcomes. They serve as important feedback for the policymakers as well as implementation agencies to make mid-course corrections. There are various infrastructure development programs, power, infrastructure, these are priority areas, and public sector projects, various projects have been taken in the public sector. But what we have observed that, which is a common knowledge, that they suffer from time and cost overruns. One figure which I have taken from the Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation, they are saying that Government of India, 51% of the mega infrastructure projects were delayed by more than 1 year. And they calculated the cost overrun of the project put together was around 22%, which to me seems a lower figure. Poor project management remains the prime reason for this anomaly. Our audit of public projects helps improve project management. There is another very important area where public auditing is helping the governance. That is public procurement. Around 25% of our annual GDP is spent in public procurement. This involves buying of goods and services for various public activities, whether armaments for defense, rolling stock for railways, setting up of power plants, or buying medicines for healthcare. So we require sound public procurement, and this procurement is an activity which is vulnerable to misuse and corruption. CAG's audit is an important means of not only ensuring value for money, but also preventing and detecting fraud and corruption in procurement. Another area where we are helpful in improving the governance is monitoring the government's responsibility towards delivery of public services. Interestingly, in India, this momentum, this aspect has been gaining momentum for the last few years, and some states have passed public service delivery legislations. As of now, 17 states have taken up public service delivery legislation. So it is for the public audit authority to see whether these acts are really being implemented or not. And such type of audits also are being taken up by us. Now finally, the issue is of whether we are contributing to the policy also. Here there is some grey area, and normally it is understood that the public auditing has got no role in policy formulation. They cannot question the policy. While I agree to some extent, but still there is a role, and auditing can help the government in adopting better policy designs by way of its objective performance audits of various government programs and schemes. Now through these audit can find gaps in the policy as well as inefficiencies in implementation. Also, we can draw useful lessons from such audit reports, and they can also point to the fact that major policy decisions should be initiated only after proper understanding of the conditions necessary for the success of the policy which is being adopted. As we know, in India, as in most countries being run by a constitutional government, mandate to public auditors is to conduct audit of government departments and report their findings to the parliament. Here, ladies and gentlemen, there is a dilemma. And this dilemma is with regard to whether our responsibility, the public auditor's responsibility, ends the moment we submit our report for laying in the parliament or the state legislature. Now, no matter many important findings are not able to even attract the preliminary attention of the Public Accounts Committee, the executive at times decide to even unreasonably delay laying of such reports in the legislature. Is CAG expected to be a mute spectator if no follow-up cognizance of audit findings is taken? Whether CAG owes some responsibility to the ultimate stakeholder, that is the citizens? Do we not share the responsibility in making a difference to people's lives? These are some of the questions which are often asked within ourselves. And the issue is that whether we just stop at the level, just submit the report and let the PAC take over after that, or we can do something else, something beyond this. Because what I feel and what I must feel that these reports are the product of a meticulous and painstaking audit process and labor. So the value and impact of audit reports are reflected in the extent to which they are able to meet the expectations of our three main stakeholders. And these stakeholders are the lawmakers, the executive, and citizens. Now, when we submit the report to the Parliament, the Public Accounts Committee or the Committee on Public Undertakings, they take up these reports for detailed examination. But there are some limiting factors. And these are that the PAC and Committee on Public Undertaking cannot take all the reports. So they select. And in the process of selection, some of the important reports are left out. And nothing is done on those reports. Another issue which comes to our mind is that if we report something irregular, or say illegal or beyond the rules, then we mention the report. But we do not go to the extent of fixing the responsibility. So is there any authority or agency which can fix the responsibility also as a follow-up of the CAG report? At times in the report, the CAG says that there is excess expenditure, that is expenditure beyond the authorization of the legislature. Now, in a normal course, and the Constitution also provides for that, this excess expenditure has to be regularized. But in many states, this is quite common, that the excess expenditure is not regularized in time, and this increases the risk of misappropriation of funds. Now, such a scenario does not bode well for effective parliamentary control over the executive. So therefore, we are trying our best to find ways to work more closely with the parliament and its committees, and as well as more so with the state legislatures and its committees. I am told that in some of the countries in USA, UK, the Auditor General is frequently asked by the Parliament to conduct audit and studies on issues raised in the Parliament or issues of public concern. So this type of system is not existing in our country. So that's the limiting factor. Now coming to the executive. The executive is our most important stakeholder with whom we interact more directly and frequently. Our findings and recommendations serve as an insight for improving the performance of the organizations. But all this can happen only if the executive sees audit as an aid to management and not as an adversary. On the contrary, our experience shows that the executive is mostly defensive and treats audit as a mere fault-finding exercise. This attitude needs to change. There is also a tendency to blame the oversight agencies for the inability of public servants to take quick and innovative decisions. This is also a misconception. By the very nature of our mandate, we are supposed to point out errors, non-compliance, or mismanagement, and report exceptions. Audit findings should be perceived as positive reinforcements intended for undertaking corrections. Treating them as finger-pointing serves little purpose. On our part, we try our best to see that audit findings are not accusatory in nature, but add value to the organization. Our observations are based on due appreciation of the management's predicament. To ensure a more balanced reporting, we have started the practice of reporting the achievements, improvements, and good practices of organization, also to encourage good performance. In our reports now, we give some box items. If there is some good practice, then we underline that. That is what is something which we have noted, and this is something good which has been done by a particular department or organization. To make our findings more useful in reforming systems, we do not stop at pointing out anomalies, but are trying to analyze its root cause. So we try to study the gaps in the system and give some positive recommendations. Another area which we are now focusing is that follow-up audits. What happens once the report is submitted and the government agrees to recommendations, and also the Parliament PAC has also agreed with the recommendations. So we want to see whether any follow-up action has been taken on the recommendations which have been accepted. So that is an area where we can conduct follow-up audits. Now finally, the third stakeholder is the public, and we have to see that whether our reports are being communicated to the public in a manner where they are able to understand the whole complexity of the financial issues and recommendations. So for this, the report, we feel that we have to improve the accessibility, and in that direction we have taken some steps. We have to improve the usability also, and we have to improve its relevance also. So if we are able to, if public is able to access our reports, and at present what happens, mostly our reports are publicized through media, and at times media tends to sensationalize those issues. So that loses the real positive aspect of that report sometimes. So there can be an alternative that the reports have to be communicated in a simpler language, in a more understanding format, and maybe through seminars, workshops, or some academic institutions may also take part in that. So a positive discourse is encouraged. This is the point which I wanted to make. And for in fact, in the past, we have taken up this practice of giving a shorter version of the report, which we call naughty books, and this is accompanied by a CD also, where one can easily access the detailed report also. Now, similarly, if the report recommendations and reports are relevant to the public needs, then they will be acceptable. So they have to be useful, and they must echo the citizens' concern. And we are taking up the help of public organizations, even NGOs, to identify the subjects, as well as to take their advice during the course of deciding the audit process. And in the past, we have done once for water pollution in the country, that was a subject where we involved the various organizations, various government agencies, non-governmental agencies, and we try to understand from that what are the issues before them, so that we can accordingly decide the scope of our audit. Also, recently we did it for the renewable energy resources also. So that's also very different. Only when report is aligned to the public interest, then they will feel that this is serving a useful purpose. We have undertaken some audit on request also. Like recently, Delhi government a year back had made a request to us for making for taking an audit of the this electricity distribution companies. So that type of audit we have taken. Now, another area where we are interacting with the stakeholders is social audit, and as I earlier also I mentioned that huge amount is being spent from the budget on socio-economic development. It's around $270 billion. I have worked out an average for each district. The amount is staggering. It is $41 million for each district. $41 million for each district in India. So this much amount is being spent. So this social audit is a audit process which is an approach from the globe, from the what we call top down, and the other approaches from bottom up, exactly. So this is bottom up approach, and there we involve the beneficiaries in the first round, and beneficiaries are told that this is what has been done by the government agencies, and they come out with the facts that no, nothing has been done. So these reports are generated from bottom, and these reports are of great help to conducting the audit by the CAE also. Now I will come to the third part, that is emerging challenges. So I must, because otherwise my lecture will be incomplete unless I give some challenges also. These are in the international public audit also. It's not only in India, and other places also. This is what we are interacting with other SAIs also. And first and very important challenge is that now many of the government programs and activities are being undertaken on a digital platform, which is creating tremendous data. So there is a problem of, you call it big data. Google CEO Eric Schmidt in 2010, he said that there were 5 exabytes of information created between the dawn of civilization through 2003. But that much information now created every 2 days. He said it in 2010. I understand that even if we don't agree with this, then in 2015, that much of data is created every half day. So it is a huge explosion of data which government, various organizations, government agencies are facing. And the problem is being faced by the auditors also. So how we tackle and how we enter in that realm of big data. So we have to improve our capabilities. That's very important. Now earlier we used to have traditional analytical tools, and like one had IDEA, MS Access, MS Excel, SQL, etc. But now we are finding that those tools are not very effective, and we have to go for advanced analytical tools for conducting audit as well. This problem we faced just this DISCOM audit also, because there's so much of data was being created by the DISCOM companies that we were not able to face it and go inside the data and find out audit findings, take out audit findings. So it is increasingly possible to analyze the entirety or almost all data rather than just a small, carefully chosen subset of sample if we adopt an analytical approach by using advanced computer-aided tools. Also, we can take help of visual analytics also, where by analyzing data through these advanced tools, we have that visual presentation of any flaws or gaps that can, so that is an area where we are working, and that's the challenge of big data which we are facing. The other challenge which I would like to mention is, of course, very simple, but very serious also. People normally ask us also that you are auditing everyone, but who is auditing you? So this is normal question. Who audits public auditors? Are public auditors transparent and accountable? So our accountability itself may be questioned at some point of time. And this issue has been attended to by the international community also, and they have suggested some methods and tools. And for example, a simple thing is that I must also publish an annual report transparently stating what all I have done throughout this year. So publication of an annual performance report by the SAIs. Then there is another method which is being adopted, peer review. We did it in India, that we requested Australian Auditor General to audit our organization. And they submitted a report, and they told that this is what you are doing correctly, but if there are improvements also you can make. So this is peer review system. So by publication of reports, by peer review. Another issue is that another step which has been taken by the international community is that they have worked out a SAI performance measurement framework. How we assess the performance of a supreme audit institution. And India has also undertaken on this basis the performance audit of Bhutan and Nepal on their request. This can be on request only. But there is a framework through which we can assess their effectiveness. And lastly, the international standards, this INTOSAI, that is International Congress of our Supreme Audit Institution, they have worked a framework for standards we call International Standards for Supreme Audit Institution. So all Supreme Audit institutions must adhere to these standards. So by adopting these few steps, probably we can tackle the problem of accountability of the public auditors. Third challenge which I am going to discuss is now to do with the changing paradigm of accountability in public audits. There are two fundamental shifts which I would like to mention in the public finance landscape. First is, and which is known, I am not saying something which is not known. First is that government has gradually withdrawn from several economic activities and handing over many responsibilities to the private sector. And second is, the term public resources itself has acquired a much wider meaning. So these shifts are being noticed, and this is having an impact on the overall public auditing, which ultimately may impact the government also. I will take up the second issue first. Hitherto, public auditor focused on audit of financial resource or budgetary resources and expenditure related to such resources. But there is a paradigm shift. Now, the public resources are encompassing even many non-conventional resources such as spectrum, is a non-conventional resource, intellectual property, and even genetic resources. So the very envelope of public resources is increasing. It's getting wider the scope. From mere financial attest audit, we used to do earlier financial attest audit. We have graduated to performance audit and to compliance audit, and from compliance audit to performance audit. However, public auditors are now required to focus on honing their skills to meet the challenges posed by the exploitation and usage of whole variety of public resources. Earlier, we thought that sand on the bank of Ganga is a public resource. But now we are well aware that Ganga as a whole ecosystem itself is a public resource. This conceptual evolution has caused a change in the accountability paradigm, and the new areas of accountability are opening up in governance. Now, other shift which I mentioned is more obvious, is increasing role of private enterprise in sharing responsibilities in management of public resources. as well as the delivery of public services. We are witnessing several avenues of interaction between private enterprises and the government. There may be a system where a public resource is given on auction or on license, or there may be a joint management methodology, a joint sector company or like that. Or there can be, third is where private enterprise have been permitted by the government or agreement to build a public road, such other facilities, or connect all. So this interaction is increasing. Indian economy is also witnessing expansion of private sector in private sector's role in managing public resources and utilities. It is a matter of record that numerous Indian and foreign companies have carried out these activities with high standards of transparency and accountability. However, there are some disturbing trends as well. Auditing projects involving private sector participation is thus a new frontier for public auditing. Now, here, in this regard, I would just mention that a few years back, we wanted to audit telecoms, the service providers for telecommunication, these companies, private companies. But they objected. They said, no, you cannot, because you cannot see our books of accounts. So there was a stalemate, and the matter went up to the Supreme Court of India. And Supreme Court, in only April 2014, it clarified upon the issue, and it turned a new leaf for public auditing, because court allowed CAG to audit private companies using national resources allocated by the government. It's a very, I will give a quote from the order of the Supreme Court. I am quoting: the CAG's examination of the accounts of the service providers in a revenue sharing contract is extremely important to ascertain whether there is an unlawful gain to the service provider and an unlawful loss to the Union of India, because the revenue generated out of that has to be credited to the Consolidated Fund of India. The subject matter with which we are concerned, as already indicated, the Supreme Court is saying, as a spectrum, a national resource, which belongs to the people. Therefore, people of this country, through Parliament, should know how its natural resources have been dealt with by the Union State or its instrumentality, or even by US license holders. Instances are not rare where even the executive at times acts hand in glove with license holders who deal with the natural resources. Hence, necessity of proper parliamentary control over the resources, unquote. Now, this type of parliamentary control is possible over the public resources possible through institutions like the CAG. Because whenever there is a possibility of misuse of public resources, the CAG has to be stepped in. Now, these trends have resulted in, and we have observed in many of our audits that they have resulted in, because this certain, we have found that certain players are trying to distort competition, upset free market fairness, and cause loss to both public exchequer and competitors. Many of the corporate tycoons throughout the emerging economies are accused of making fortunes by rent seeking. This is more common in industries that are vulnerable to monopoly, or that involve licensing or heavy state involvement. Some of the common examples are mining, telecom, oil and gas exploration, public infrastructure, utilities. Capitalism based on rent seeking is not just unfair, but also bad for long-term growth. In such an environment, resources are misallocated, competition is repressed, and dynamic new forms are stifled by better connected players. And if linked to the financing of politics, rent-heavy capitalism sets a wrong tone at the top that can also let petty corruption flourish. There is an evidence to suggest that countries that do well to counter crony capitalism generally have better institutions. Governments therefore must aim to improve regulation and boost competition through sound institutions. So as private-public interface grow, we have to see whether the role of public auditors in this perspective will also expand. Accountability of the executive as well as that of private enterprise will require to be redefined and strengthened through sound and effective institutions which ought to be independent as well as credible. It may be necessary for the executive to make sensible and simplified changes in the design of contracts so that incentives to fudge revenue are systematically removed. The scenario in emerging and developing economies require the policymakers to further strengthen the regulatory and law enforcement agencies and step up awareness and sensitize all stakeholders. Regulators will have to devise better norms and simpler procedures in avenues for private sector participation. Ladies and gentlemen, in today's world, the surging youth and developed deprived sections are angry about corruption and governance deficit. But there is a ray of hope. The economic progress that has created a class of rent seekers has also created its nemesis. That is, the new, educated, urban, tax-paying middle class that is aware of its rights and role and pushing for a change. The unlimited channels of sharing information facilitate sharing of ideas across different regions in the world in a matter of seconds. The enterprising youth has been able to link the regions, nationalities, societies, and cultures of the world in a manner wherein these artificial boundaries among us have been erased and the ideas, thoughts, and practices are shared by all of us. This presents an opportunity which is unparalleled in the history of mankind. I therefore believe that it is for all of us to seize this opportunity and to give right direction to the economic progress and to improve the living standards of millions through governance that is accountable and which stands for purity